Before we jump into the mandate setting webinar today, I'd like to set the frame a little bit and orient ourselves where we are at the moment. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we have set up a number of webinars for you. And some of you might have joined the webinar on the Climate City contract yesterday, and multiple others are following in the next couple of weeks. And all of these webinars and all of the content that we are creating, they're structured around what we call the climate transition map. The climate transition map is a combination of the best approaches we have found across Europe, focused on systemic change within cities. It's heavily built on viable cities approach in Sweden, but also what Climate Kick has been doing with the Healthy Clean Cities program and ICLEI's framework. What we'd like to stress in this climate transition map is that it is non-linear, that it is inclusive, systemic, iterative, that cities will be coming from different points, and that is not only okay, but good. We wanted this map to be useful to you, no matter where you start, so that you can use it for your ongoing work, and with its support and resources, deepen and hopefully speed up the transition towards climate neutrality. As you can see in the map, the first couple of stages are related to the Climate City contract and the mission label. And the first phase is focused on building a strong mandate. Next slide, please. These are the upcoming webinars that I just wanted to show you briefly. You can look at them in more detail on our portal. Next slide, please. Before the summer, we sent out a survey to the cities, and we asked you, what is your biggest need when it comes to building a strong mandate? And what we heard from you is that mobilizing resources and capacity is by far the biggest barrier. Right after that, you noted that developing a multi-actor transition team and bringing diverse competencies together is a big need as well. And another answer that got a high number of responses was building new collaborative networks and governance structures. Today, we have invited 6 wonderful speakers, and I'm very thankful that they've had time today. They will share their rich experience, which will hopefully help you to build the mandate in your city. Joining us today is Maria Vasilakou, who used to be the deputy mayor of the city of Vienna for a couple of years. She's the mission board member, and she's currently working with Greek cities very successfully, as I can say. And I'm very keen and looking forward to hearing her practical guidance and advice. Katrien Rieken is the director of Leuven 2030, an organization with 400 members across Leuven, working towards climate neutrality. Katrien has been part of the Healthy Clean Cities program in the past, and it has always been a huge pleasure to learn with her. Jordi Perez is joining us from Valencia today. He's an urban strategy and sustainable agenda general coordinator in the mayor's office. And as you might have seen from the email that we sent out before the webinar, Valencia has been doing amazing communication and governance work, and the Spanish cities have also met in summer for a summer school. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing Jordi's recommendations and experiences. Anna Ledin is joining us from the city of Gothenburg today. She's the director of the Environmental Administration, which is a department with 180 employees dealing with environmental issues, climate change, and health aspects. Sounds like a lot of work. Johan Gammelgaard has been working with the city of Umeå for 24 years, and he's currently Director of Innovation. I'm very much looking forward to hearing his experience as well. And last but not least, Martin van Staan has joined the city of Den Haag in 2019. He's currently Strategic Sustainability Advisor and responsible for the 100 Climate Neutral Cities mission. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from the speakers today. As the theme is quite complex, we've asked the speakers to focus on either internal mandate setting, which is within the municipality, external, meaning the ecosystem as a whole, maybe also utility companies, citizens, other important stakeholders, or other parts of governing. And what we meant by that is also connected to the federal level, the regional level. So how do you strengthen the mandate with other parts of governing? And they have structured their presentations around that. We have approximately 17 minutes per speaker. So I've asked each of them to prepare a presentation that's roughly 7-8 minutes long, and then we'll have time for question and answers afterwards. If you have questions, please put them into the chat, and we will take them after each presentation. If you haven't heard it at the beginning of the webinar, we're recording this session because September is a very busy period, and we know that not everybody can be here, but we want to make it available on the portal so that people can see it afterwards. And we might also take parts of this webinar and use the learnings in other ways if possible. Good. With this, I would like to hand over to Katrine. Next slide, please. Next one. There. Thanks.
Super. Thank you, Louise, for the kind invitation and introduction. And hello, everyone. Very honored to be here amongst the other speakers and in this good company. I think it's super important that we continuously share experiences, and so it's my pleasure to introduce you to the journey that Leuven has taken up the past few years, which was, as in many cities, I suppose, it's not a walk in the park. It's a tough road ahead, and so I think that makes it all the more valuable to share experiences. I think my angle today is on the external mandate setting. So next slide, please. What I would like to share with you is the focus on how in Leuven we have tried to strengthen support in society. What was our approach, and what were crucial elements in that approach to help us build that external mandate. Next slide, please. And so the issue basically was about moving towards a climate neutral city in an accelerated way, because we have been focusing on 2050 for many years and only accelerating, in a recent past towards climate neutrality in 2030. It's very clear that that's a massive challenge, and that can not only be put on a city's organization or local government's shoulders, but that should be profoundly embraced by a critical mass in your society. So how on earth start with that work? And so next slide, please. We would like to share with you a possible 5-step solution pathway, which has worked for Leuven, and which might be inspiring for other cities around. Maybe just this has worked for Leuven as being a university city with 100,000 inhabitants and 50,000 students. That might be maybe interesting information to keep aside, because the size of the city also, I think, matters for certain approaches. So I'm going to take you through 5 steps. Next slide, please. And I have 2 slides per step. So I think first of all, it's important to have a shared mission. I think thanks to the mission on climate neutral and smart cities, of course, the shared mission is clear, even though you can never underestimate the importance of translating that to your audience, because just striving towards a climate neutral future for many partners in society is still something vague or not very inviting. And so we have framed that very clearly on the dot on the horizon is about safeguarding, strengthening health and well-being in our community, and doing that in a social just way. And embracing, I think that's the second important point here, showing that shared mission requires innovation in all kinds of domains. So it's, you know, saying goodbye to business as usual and embracing having confidence in doing things differently, developing new things, not only technical innovation, but also governance innovation, climate innovation. So it requires a very open mindset. And so the shared mission and the necessity of innovation, next slide, please, is what we have experienced as a very crucial first step, inviting stakeholders to see this as a way of taking up responsibility, but also of seeing and showing the opportunity of you know, trying to develop pathways towards that future. Second, next slide, please. Starting from a shared mission, next step is to go towards shared ownership. In Leuven, we had, I think, the good experience that in 2013 we have founded an NGO in which all cornerstones of society are equally represented. So that NGO now operates for some 9 years. And next slide, please. That shows, for example, the board of directors of our NGO. And so we have 6 trios of board members that all represent a part of our society. So the first 3 board members represent our citizens. The second represent civil society. Below left is the representatives of the business and companies in our society. Top right, knowledge institutions. Then you have our 3 coalition partners. So that's the city government representatives. And then below right, representatives of other governmental organizations, like, for example, energy company or public transport company. And so these 18 persons, they are voted for by the General Assembly, by our 500 members now, every 4 years, and they assembly every month for free. So it's really shared ownership to develop our strategies and our way forward. Next slide, please. So shared mission, shared ownership, and then a third one to work on external mandates. It's about keeping science close. I think it's very important to have that neutral scientific base around the steps that you want to take forward. We developed a roadmap in Leuven showing scope 1, 2, 3 emissions and all steps that needed to be taken by the community between 2019 and 2050 at that time. And it was made up by over 70 experts from all kinds of organizations, universities, city administrations, engineering offices, you name it. They all did that for free because they co-own the challenge. And having this roadmap builds credibility about the steps forward, because it's not a mixture of different agendas. We're in this with people with different values, different agendas. Having this neutral, scientifically underpinned roadmap is a third crucial element in activating external mandates. Next slide, please. And so this is one example of the timeline, which shows clearly within 13 programs, what choices do we have to make year after year if we are serious about this climate neutrality transition. Fourth, next slide, please. It's about making engagements explicit and public. We want to build external mandates, and we need to invite our stakeholders to engage and to do so explicitly and publicly. Next slide, please. So it's about, this is all, it's so much people's work, this work. So we bring people together continuously. We make them engage explicitly and publicly. We make them undersign commitments with signatures at the highest strategic level. So we can look each other in the eye and we know how far everyone engages. And then fifthly, and that's my last point, next slide, please. It's also about celebrating and connecting. I think that it's very important. As I said, it's not a walk in the park. It will, in not any city, be a walk in the park. It's important to celebrate the steps forward and to celebrate the fact that it has not been easy. And it's a way of connecting too, of being very appreciative towards those in power of moving the transition forward. Next slide, please. And I think it's not only about connecting within our communities, but also across communities. And so I'm very much looking forward that throughout the European missions processes, we can continue to connect this way, because there's so many challenges that we share, and that we could be accelerating each other's transitions by sharing and by collaborating. So I think the celebrating and connecting is not only within your community, but also, you know, across communities. And then final slide, I think, last slide. So that's my wrap up. Work on the common ground, work on shared ownership, work on pathways to collaborate and reward engagements, go public with those, and don't forget to celebrate and connect through celebration. It's a tough road. So we need to make it as light and effortless as possible too, because it's a long-term commitment. And so I think it's a challenge for everyone to safeguard his and her own energy level. I think also in Leuven, next slide, please. That's the really last one. Just want to say that I think we're all in this together. So also in Leuven, it's a struggle for resources, for capacity, for competences, it's a continuous struggle, a struggle that we share. So let's continue to connect and develop solution pathways so that we can make this work together as a whole, and build the best possible future for our communities. Thank you.
Katrien, that was beautiful. Thank you very much for kicking us off so wonderfully. And I totally agree that we need to also enjoy this ride. That was beautiful. As generating resources was a big part of it, I wonder if you could briefly touch upon, before I open up to questions from the chat, if you could outline a little bit how Leuven 2030 is funded for all of us.
Yeah, it's funded. We have 4 important sources of funding. The first one is the city government, who was also one of our founding fathers or mothers, because we were founded by 60 partners. Then we have very loyal sponsorships. I think we have 10 sponsors. It's the university hospitals, it's the public transport company. So it's many partners that are within the board of directors, but they did not buy a seat in the board of directors. So let me be clear on that. That's really a democratic process where all 500 members vote for the board. But so we have sponsorships. Then thirdly, we have our memberships, so everyone can become a member, and but that's, it's a modest source of income. Citizens pay 15 euros a year, and everyone and NGOs too, and all the others are paying 500 euros a year. So that's our third source. And then fourth source, which has been one of the most important the past years, is European funding. So we had a bad year on that area, and so we feel immediately how that gives a lot of financial stress. So there's been critical conversations with our board on how we can continue to operate, because it's not a given. So it continues to be a source of stress for me to be able to continue this road. But on the other hand, I think what we have always tried in Leuven is working on that shared ownership, which has shown that, we have 18 board members that come together every month for 3 hours, and they all do it for free. We have a roadmap that has been made up by over 70 experts that have not charged us any fee. We have program managers that work 1 day a week for us that come from different organizations that don't charge their time. And so for us in Leuven, that has worked out very nicely to build capacity and resources, starting from a shared mission and shared ownership, because that enables a lot of partners to contribute in a way, to contribute to something that is bigger than their own story or their own organization, and it facilitates engagement.
It's the mission.
Yeah.
Let me go to the questions in the chat. We have Eileen that asks, how did you start the collaboration process? Did you make a choice of whom to invite, or was everybody invited? How do they commit, on which terms?
Yeah, that's nice questions. I was on board in Leuven in 2013. I was at a point where there were already a lot of informal processes going on, initiated by the city of Leuven, who reached out to civil society, mainly to collaborate on sustainability in general. So there was already a very important warming up of several partners to commit towards higher climate ambitions. And then I think that the University of Leuven has made up a scientific report stating, dear City of Leuven, if you want to be, if you're serious about this transition, you need to organize more structurally and more sustainably. And so you need to found an NGO. And at that point, we have invited, from that point on, we have invited everyone to join. So we had 60 founding members and grew up until over 500 today. I wished we were 5,000 by now. So my dream is that we could grow much faster as we do. But so it's a very open NGO. There is no prerequisite to be able to enter, only that, of course, intrinsically you need to embrace that mission towards climate neutrality, of course, and you only commit for a year, and that commitment is very light. It's just that, you know, I'm fond about the idea of having a climate neutral future ahead, and I want to contribute in every way that's possible for me as an organization or as a citizen. So.
Katrine, there are several other questions in the chat. Can you see the box?
Yeah, I've opened it.
Maybe we'll take one more, but then maybe later, if you have a little time and you could answer them, would be fantastic. One question I have for you in front of the audience is, I know that the statutes, or the Statuten, however you pronounce it in English, you have them, and they kind of give a little bit more detail of how the governance is set up in the background. Is that something that could be shared, perhaps, for others?
Yes, it can, of course. It's in Dutch though, so maybe I should translate it through DeepL, because we don't have an English version. And we do have a website, pretty brand new, which is in English, which already shows the basis of our structure. So it explains about our General Assembly, our Board of Directors, our Executive Committee. So you find already some information in English on the website. But the larger document, which is a boring document, I think, I could translate it through DeepL and then share it, of course.
But maybe share the website in the chat. It looks like people would be interested, and I found it very useful back then. So, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. Thank you so much, Katrine. We have so many interesting speakers today, so we'll have to move on.
Thank you.
Maria, may I ask you to come on stage for us? I know that you wanted to speak about the example in Greece, and Greece has recently committed, the federal government has committed funds for the cities, which is an amazing achievement. I also know that you've had great successes in the past. Over to you.
So good afternoon to everybody. Yes, without further ado, let us get started. Next slide, please. So what I will be talking about today is how to get support and commitment from regional, national, and other government levels. And I think that what we will find out is that it is a lot pretty much like what Katrine has been talking about already. In the end, it is more or less the same story that repeats itself. Now, when it comes to key barriers, I think first and foremost, it's lack of information. we need to actively inform all other levels of government. It's of course about fragmentation. So the mission requires a holistic approach and a multitude of action areas, which then means that you have several ministries, example given, or agencies that are related. But administrations are in most parts of the world already almost still pressed in silos, and it's very difficult to make them understand that they're needed. So it is about sharing the mission. And then it's about shared ownership, as Katrin put it. So we need to overcome old cultures of organization and move towards collaboration. And last but not least, we need shared priorities, because different levels of government will have different priorities. So how do we arrive at shared priorities? And it's also about visibility. So it is about the very, very basic question, who takes the lead, and then who gets the credits for contributing. So next slide, please. What we did was also an approach that I tried to subdivide in different phases. In phase one, that was already back in the beginnings of 2022. It was about identifying and informing all relevant public and stakeholders. And we did that individually by conducting back then several physical events, and later on, and also face-to-face meetings, and later, of course, due to the pandemic, online events. And what we also did was very early in time to also have a conference event where several attended, and that has been a turning point in terms of conveying the message and in terms of information. Already back then, so that was in spring 2020, a national mission platform was formed that was actually involving several key stakeholders, and especially people from different. And what was also is that at this point we had the Ministry of take the lead, identify further stakeholders, invite them, and involve them regularly. Also in this phase, the first cities decided that they want to run, let's say, for the mission, so started preparing their expression of interest. And where phase 3 started, and in this phase 3, the mayors have been extremely important. I would say they have been the most important people in this quest, in the sense that they have joined forces and that they have addressed the national government together in a joint letter asking for support. Now, all this amounted in the creation of the Climate Smart Cities Pact, which was launched through the Alliance, so Greek Cities Alliance towards Climate Neutrality by 2030. And the kickoff event was January, by the end of January 2022, with 21 municipalities all together signing. Next slide, please. In phase 3, so more or less immediately after signing the pact and launching the platform, we had a visit by mission manager Matthew Baldwin to Athens, including individual meetings with different very important stakeholders, example given the director of the Green Fund, and a stakeholder event that was organized for him to inform, inspire, and activate. And we're now in phase 4. In phase 4, the Green Fund has allocated already altogether 20 million euro as a mission budget. 10 of them are immediately accessible, followed by another 10 to come later in time. And we have also had an event in Thessaloniki lately, where several stakeholders from the national level participated, and where it was agreed that also the cities, the mission cities, will have a priority approach, access actually to different other programs that are relevant for achieving the targets of the mission. So if we move on to the next slide, please. I think that when it comes to the key recommendations, it's actually as simple as it always is, but sometimes we just tend to forget that these are things that really need to be done. So it's about providing information timely, actively, and individually to all identified stakeholders. So most notably, it is also very important to identify stakeholders, which then means that you need to place the lead in the hands of somebody who is who has information, who has experience, and who knows who may be other crucial stakeholders and how to approach them. In our case, it was the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment who has been very crucial to identifying and mobilizing, activating further stakeholders. And I think that this is something that is worth reflecting upon and talking about perhaps a tiny bit. I personally am always in favor of high-level public service agents. In these cases, they may prove to be the best to take the lead. Then it is about encouraging mayors to join forces and take shared action and address together other stakeholders and other tiers. Next slide, please. In our case, it has been a good move to also involve the Prime Minister. It also has a lot to do with visibility and who takes the credits. And I think in this case, it gives the mission, it makes the mission more important, and it makes it more important for several stakeholders to become visible in the way that they contribute. It's about involving EU, high-level EU representatives, especially ones that can inspire. And it's about looking out for and involving inspiring personalities. So really personalities matter. And last but not least, it's about steering and gearing public events and meetings toward aspired results. So it is about addressing openly financing priorities and budget contributions and preparing especially public meetings in a way that some will go in first, will let everybody else know what they will be contributing, and thus create an overall climate where everybody feels and realizes that it is not only about supporting the mission in terms of word, but also supporting the mission in terms of very concrete contributions. So this is where we stand now. Thank you.
Maria, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for this concise, dense experience. And it's amazing to see the positive results you have generated in this very short period. So hopefully others will be able to follow your lead. I see there is a question in the chat. Where did the finances from the Green Fund come from under solution in phase 4? You mentioned that.
Well, the Green Fund has already does have quite a budget that is there to, once again, at the national level, to finance different actions that will all contribute most notably towards climate neutrality, but also other environmental, very, very crucial aspects. And in our case, it was about allocating parts of these funds towards the mission cities specifically, because the Green Fund functions in a way that different programs in different cities and different ministries can actually apply individually and may or may not get funding. But again, in our case, it is about the allocation of these means, which then again, by the way, need specific programs to be developed in order to have access to the fund. But then they have a priority access. And I think that this is what we will be encountering very often in the next months and years when it comes to the mission, because the mission is more or less a label which enables priority access, but then you always have and need to develop very specific, of course, programs and solutions in order to be able to access the fund.
And is the Green Fund entirely provided by the central government?
I have to confess that I wouldn't know where it comes from in its entirety. I would say, I would take a guess now and say it comes from government. And of course, it may be also coming from European funds that have been allocated for this case into the fund.
Mm-hmm. And you said before that you'd like to talk a little bit more about working with high-level public service as a key as a lead for this work. Could you expand on that slightly, please?
I think that it is really very important to think about who is to take the lead here. And I have always found out that high-level, once again, public servants have the network, they have the experience, and well, if you have good luck, they may also have the personality that goes with it. And they have, in most cases, continuity within public service.
Mm-hmm.
So having somebody from public service take the lead is important. And perhaps I'm trying to find a diplomatic way to express it. I can't, so I will address it openly, coming myself from politics directly. I think that they may have less antagonism in some situations, because it is about sharing a vision, it is about sharing a mission, and about sharing ownership. But yet again, in many parts of the world, you will have high visibility for, let's say, the Ministry of Environment or the Departments of Environment, and others will be reluctant to join, in a sense, asking the typical question, what's in it for me? So looking into what's in it for them and having a very connected and very experienced, inspiring personality take the lead may prove to be a very good idea in order to access them and to start involving them. After a while, they will develop, of course, their own ideas, they will develop their own role, they will take up responsibility, but it's always about the beginnings that are very tricky.
Fantastic. There's a comment in the chat that says, Ms. Vasilakou added a significant value with her initiatives and ideas in Greece and in general to the city's mission. Thank you.
Oh.
So I'd like to.
Thank you.
I'd also like to say that. Thank you so much for getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to join us here today. I haven't even noted that yet. It's incredible. Also to you, Maria, I think there are 2 more questions in the chat. If you have 5 minutes to spare, and if you could still answer them, that would be greatly appreciated. For now, we'll hand over to the 3rd speaker, Jordi Paris, joining from Valencia. Jordi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Luis, and hi everybody. Good afternoon, and well, yeah, thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this webinar and to share all our experiences with all these inspiring cities, because most of the things I want to talk about have already been mentioned in the previous presentation. So I think it's great to be here sharing all the experiences from all the different cities. Well, the first idea I just would like to emphasize is that in Valencia, when we address the mission, the climate mission, from the very beginning, we try to do something which I think is special, or maybe we share it with some other cities, like for instance, Leuven in the presentation before. That is that we incorporated the mission into our overall urban strategy. At the beginning of this mandate, about almost 4 years ago, we decided to develop like the Valencia 2030 urban strategy. In Valencia, we hadn't a culture or a tradition of strategic planning. We had many different strategic plannings, but they were mainly sectorial. All of them were sectorial, and they were rarely long-term oriented. So at the beginning of this mandate, we decided to develop this urban strategy. And at the same time, we decided to incorporate the mission approach, because we felt that the challenges that we were facing were so challenging that we needed to incorporate innovation. We needed to incorporate an approach which should be focused on finding new solutions to the problems or to the issues we had to address in our urban strategy. We tried, therefore, to merge the public policies with the disruptive and innovative orientation to find new solutions. And that's what we try to combine in our urban strategy. Well, that way I will try to answer the two questions that you have defined for the webinar concerning the internal and the external mandate. If you could please pass to the next slide, please. Okay, so concerning the internal mandate setting, I would like to talk about two main concerns we had, and that we have taken into consideration during the whole work that we have been developing concerning the urban strategy and the climate mission. The first issue is that we need to do something that aims to go beyond the electoral periods. I mean, it's clear that the 2030, we wanted to establish a project with a 2030 horizon. We needed to establish a way of working that was really new in the city. We had no previous precedence on that way of addressing a strategy for the overall city and with this temporal horizon. So, this is something that we incorporated from the very beginning. And it was not easy, because nowadays in Spain, we have a really conflictual and a lot of confrontation in the political realm. But at least all the decisions that have been made in the city of Valencia concerning the urban strategy and concerning the climate mission have been made with a great political consensus. Particularly, the mission in our plenary session was approved by 31 out of 33 councillors of the plenary. Only the extreme right party was against the establishment of the mission and also against the urban strategy. And I think that this is really important for us. I have to say that one important thing in that to reach this political consensus was the fact that we tried to gain a legitimacy from external elements, of course, from the European Commission, but also we gained legitimacy through the belonging to Spanish city networks. Particularly, CTS 2030 is a network of the 7 cities from Spain that are involved in the mission. And I think that belonging to such a network in which we can find cities that are ruled by different parties from the right wing or from the left wing, also enabled us to gain a little bit of consensus here in the city, because it allowed us to show that this was not part of our, I would say, local political squabbles, but that was something else in which all the parts needed to be involved. Okay, that would be the first concern we have. And the second one would be related to the need to align, to organizationally align all the city council towards these shared goals, these visions, these lines of action, etc. And this is, and I think this is the great challenge we have in front of us, because of course we have the great barrier that I would say that are the silos. A local administration which is organized in a fragmented way with different departments doing different things, and with a lot of difficulties in establishing a coordination between the different initiatives that we launch. And also the urban strategy and the mission approach have been a great opportunity to establish internal spaces in which these collaborations can emerge and can take form. For instance, we have created, because this is also a very cultural issue, we have created our mission day, which is Friday's morning. The Friday's morning is the day where all the different people from the different departments in the city council, and sometimes from outside the city council, come together and have our weekly meeting in order to address all the issues that we need to work in to develop and to advance the work related to the mission and the urban strategy. If you can go to the next slide, please. Well, I'm not sure if you will be able to read that, but what we have tried to do is to align of the different strategic lines that we have defined in our urban strategy action plan with the mission, with the climate mission. We have defined different domains of impact, in which, of course, we are talking about mobility, energy, housing, also social issues, etc. And we have defined also what we have called the systemic domains, which are related to communication, participation, also regulation of internal procedures, etc., etc. And we have tried to define all the working or the strategic lines and programs that need to be developed in our urban strategy in order to address all these elements. And also in our internal, in our governance system, we have defined a way of aligning all these strategic elements that are defined in the urban strategy and also in the climate mission with the daily way of doing things and planning and organizing the projects and intervention by the city's council, with these three levels of arrangement that you can see in the slide. On one side, the strategic level, which is related to the city model that we have, with the mission, the climate mission, etc., all the main strategic goals, strategic lines, etc. Then the political level, where all the different government areas should establish the objectives and define their operative programs in order to contribute to the strategic lines. And then the operative level, at the level of the departments of the city council, in order to establish a system that enable or that allowed us to align or to mainstream the mission approach and the urban strategy into the action of the municipality. Okay, if you can go to the next slide, please. Well, yeah, and then just to finalize, because I don't want to extend more than the time that I was asked to. Just I would like to emphasize some ideas concerning the external mandate. Well, I mean, there are a lot of things that have already been mentioned by the previous speakers, but I would like just to mention one of the issues that we are implementing in Valencia, that it's what we have called the City Alliance. in which we have asked all the ecosystem, what we call the 5 elixirs of innovation, in which we have included media, to get involved with us in the mission. Of course, we are not, we have clearly expressed that we need all of them to be involved to develop the mission. And we have defined different types of involvement. The first one is what we have called the ambassadors entities, which are, I would say, like great organizations, great companies, great institutions in the city that express their willingness to contribute to the mission. And this is something that has worked. For the moment, we have almost 200 ambassadors entities that represent more than 4,000 organizations and more than 17,000 professionals that has expressed their willingness to, in their daily way of doing things, to contribute to the mission. This would be like, I would say, the great entities, the great organizations in the city, but we complement that with other kind of entities, small ones, small businesses, small stores, schools, etc., that would be our committed entities, that they do the same, but at their own scale. We complement that with the role of the citizenship, that we try to involve, engage through different ways. And we also work with the role of influencers, YouTubers, people that is able to communicate and to translate all this mission-oriented approach to the general public. And I think that that's also a really important thing, because something that we have tried to develop in Valencia is all the communication issue concerning the issue and concerning the mission. And I think that we need to innovate a lot in terms of communicating what we are doing, because it's sometimes really hard and really difficult to make us understand to the general public. Okay, and I prefer to stop here because
thank you. Thank you, Jordi. With regards to communication, let me pick that up directly. I've spoken with one of your colleagues in the past, and he said that what you do now in Valencia is that you don't actually speak about climate change that much. You try to focus on the co-benefits, what we call co-benefits. So basically a good life, clean air, less traffic, focus on the tangible things. And you don't actually speak that much about climate change anymore, right? I found that really interesting. Maybe you can expand on that. And then the second observation that I had is that I think you went out into what we call the ecosystem, and you started working with academia, citizens, the private sector, but also mass media, and you had conversations and you got consensus there, and then you went to the political representatives, right? So you started with this broad movement, and then the political representatives were always almost forced to align. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah. That's right. I mean, yeah. First of all, we do not mention, we never mention the word co-benefits, but we refer to them. Yeah, because I mean, what we realized is that it's, at least for us, it's quite difficult to. It was quite difficult to make people understand what was mission, what were missions about. In fact, sometimes we doubted them, and we were wondering if we should use the word mission for the general public, because it has a lot of connotations, very different connotations. In the end, we decided to use it. In fact, our claim now is on a mission together. Even in English, I mean, we decided to go for this claim in English, but yeah, of course, we wanted to talk about the co-benefits. I mean, because we don't want. I mean, we want people to get engaged with this project, to feel that had the opportunity to do something good for the city. Therefore, it was necessary to talk about the good things that will happen to the city if we become climate neutral. And we are sure, and it's not that difficult to explain, that climate neutral cities are cities where people may live better than they do now. So, I mean, because there are a lot of benefits. That's our main message. That's the message that we try to express. The daily life of people will be better if we reach the mission. No? So this is very important. And yeah, of course, I mean, I think we also doubted at the beginning if we were going to be able to engage all the different people from the economic sector, from the social, from the academy. And I have to say that the mission approach and the climate mission has proven to be a good claim to engage very different kind of stakeholders into one single project. I mean, we have realized that it's a good instrument in order to get them on board this shared project for the city.
That's so good to hear, and it speaks to the climate transition map that we showed at the beginning, where engaging stakeholders from the ecosystem is key. So it's really good to hear that. We have 2 more minutes left for your part of the speech, and there's one question in the chat. How is the City Alliance organized? Short and snappy answer, please.
Okay. Well, we have we have organized it through. I mean, we have in the city of Valencia we have our innovation center, which is called Las Naves. I think some of you know it, because you may have been here. And we have launched the City Alliance through this, with the support of this, and with the leadership of this center. And what we do is to ask we open a call. We open a call for the organizations, for the institutions to become ambassadors of the mission in the city. That implies some commitments, but mainly they are oriented to incorporate the mission approach into their daily task. So we like sign an agreement with all these organizations, and then we start working with them, and we start inviting them into our events or into the forums where we are having discussions. So we work. We share all the experiences that they are implementing in order to advance towards climate neutrality. For instance, supermarkets, or private companies, public institutions, etc., etc., etc. And we have these different levels that we mentioned before. A single citizen may join the alliance and commit specific issues that he or she will develop into his daily life. So, we have a web page, and people can join this City Alliance in a quite flexible and fluid way.
Fantastic.
It's not about more bureaucracy,
That's good to hear. And I saw that Eugenie shared the webpage, I believe, in the chat for anybody that's interested. Thank you so much, Jordi, for this great presentation. Good to learn from you. Anna, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you very much, Louisa. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really an honor to be here and to share one of the experience we have from Gothenburg. I think my experience and what I would like to share with you would be rather different from what we have heard already. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm sure we will have some time for some questions afterwards as well. I think we go for the next slide, please. And here I already now talked a little bit about what is my main key here, and that is leadership. which is also have been mentioned by others. Of course, we have been heard about inspiring leaders, for instance, and I think this is really, really crucial also in the case I will share with you. We can go for the next slide. Gothenburg has been a forerunner when we talk about sustainable development. Gothenburg had early an environmental program. Gothenburg was very early with a climate strategy that included also consumption and emissions from consumption outside the territorial of the city of Gothenburg. And that was one reason I went to Gothenburg 8 years ago. I left academia and working for the government and decided I would like to work in a municipality. And I was so proud that I got the opportunity to be director for the environmental administration in the city of Gothenburg. And I was really, really keen on learning to know more about these programs, these strategies, all the work going on. And so keen on learning more about how is this actually running. And I was so sure that I would be able to see a great success with aiming those goals that were put there for, at that time, 2020. What I realized very quickly when I came there is that it didn't really work that way. Although we had those programs and strategies and plans and activities, I think we had more than 200 activities in the environmental plan for the year when I came and the coming 2 or 3 years. It did really changed. The carbon dioxide emissions, yeah, they decreased, but not at least in that how quickly they have to decrease to actually meet the goals. Just too slow. And we all know this. So then we had to rethink, what do we have to do now? What is the next version of these programs? And what action do we need to take? In my case, the politicians were there. That's a fortune in Sweden. The politicians has been very active on these issues for a long time. And actually, they asked me to really penetrate, evaluate, analyze these programs and see how can we make them more efficient. There are great things going on, but it's not enough. It wasn't nothing wrong, not just enough. And I'm very proud that we got a new environmental and climate program that was decided by the City Council last year. All parties but one stand behind it. They all agree that we need to fulfill this program, where the aims are for 2030. This program is very, very different from earlier programs. This program have actually 3 parts. It's one part where we works in the silos and are allowed to work in the silos. Each administration, each company owned by the city, they works in the silos. And we have an audit system checking that they do what they have to do, what they can do. Then we have strategies, crossway strategies that really try to point out what else needs to be done. What else do we have to do to fill into the silos, to make sure that we also have this as a matrix. And then we also have established a climate transition unit or climate transition office. And I would like to focus today on that office and why we established that office and what we have learned so far from that. So we can take the next slide. The problem we faced, I've already mentioned them. We had a lot of activities with limited, and I put it like this, impact on the transition needed towards climate neutrality. There were numerous of projects, pilots, testbeds, demonstrators. Some of them have been very successful. You see the electrified transportation. All the buses in Gothenburg nowadays are electrified. We are about to electrify also the public transportation with the ferries in the city. The waste handling company is about they have a number of electrical vehicles for waste collection, etc. But still, this is not enough. It makes some difference on the mobility impact on climate change, but not enough. We have one fossil-free kindergarten, but it's only one, and it's not becoming a standard. So we have the demonstrators, but we don't really see the upscaling. And the politicians, they continue to ask for advices, how to do this. How can we make a change? And we got some normally quite short time to give them some advices. Give us more activities to do. Give us more ideas for what kind of decisions we have to make. But if you penetrate that, if you look into that, if you analyze that, you see that too often it lacks actually analysis of the potential impact. Will this really make a difference? And also, it often lacks risk assessment. For instance, regarding financial risks. Here, maybe you think I'm too tough, too rush, whatever. But I think this is really important and really crucial here, that we also need to really consider, will this actually have a huge impact? Are we making the most important steps here? In our case, we are favorable because we own quite a high number of companies in the city, which are important for climate, the climate transition. We have their own energy company. We have our own waste handling company. We are owning the harbor, which is the largest harbor in Nordic countries. So we have some impact. We actually have the possibility to do a difference here when we talk about this area. We own quite a lot of the housing in the city as well, in different companies, which means that we have the potential to work progressively, proactively on energy efficiency in buildings, as one example. And here we are going to make the difference. Here it's really important to make some strategic work. You can go to the next slide. So we mobilized around strategic activities. We really focused on what needs to be done to make the really difficult things. Everything else should be going on. So everything we have heard before here, others talking about, that is also running in Gothenburg, of course. We need to have the citizens involved. We need to have the companies involved. We need to have the NGOs involved. We work a lot together with academia. All that should be running. But this is something extra. This is something that really, really difficult to do, but can really make a huge difference regarding the emissions in the territorial part of Gothenburg. So we have been very involved in establishment of the national contract, climate contract in Sweden, which I'm sure you have heard about, and which Johan, who is going to talk after me, also has been involved in, but really engaged in that work to develop that concept. We asked for an assignment from the politicians to develop this climate transition unit, and we got that assignment. And of course, we applied to become one of EU's climate neutral and smart cities. All these issues has been important because the politicians has to stand by them, and they do for sure. What are we doing in this climate transition unit or office? Well, here we really work out a transition strategy, which is very much in Gothenburg focused on the industrial change, the industrial transformation. Thereby, we also involved a lot of companies in Gothenburg, like Volvo, for instance, but also others. We are developing an investment plan, and these are huge investments that are going to be done in the city regarding energy efficiency, energy supply, etc. And we need to make sure that we have a very good risk assessment behind what you have to do in order to reach the goal. And then we are at the third point here. We are now working on some measures that really will make a difference, which we work on as cases. And at the moment, we have 3 cases. We have the energy supply in the city. We are working on the housing, building new areas, city development, and we are working on energy efficiency. Those 3 are the really big topics at the moment. But that could change. It could be something else in a couple of months because we are developing this at the moment. So this is one example of what we have done. If I go to my next slide and the key findings, I would say that I started also with that. Leadership is the key here. We have been working according to the DAC theory established by Draft and colleagues in 2008, where we work on the direction, the alignment, and the commitment. Here is very much about the direction. We have one goal, that's to reach the climate goal. And that has been very, very helpful when we discuss this. Everyone has to focus on this goal. Whether we talk about the companies in the city, the administrations in the city, if we talk with the citizens, if you talk with other companies in the city, everyone, we have this goal. And we can talk about that goal together. And everyone can see where they can contribute to that goal. It has been extremely important for us because it's easy to put up a lot of goals. We are very focused on this goal. We have the alignment. We have this assignment for the Climate Transition Office from the government or the City Council. And we have the commitment. And this is also what others have been talking about. I just called it commitment. Me and my director colleagues, at the moment we have 10 director colleagues in the city working very, very closely together to establish the strategy, develop the strategy, and develop the investment plan. And here, this is actually asking a lot from us to really collaborate. And that has also been pointed out by others. Sharing, but also collaborating for sure. Be critical, make sure that they have the strong risk analysis to make sure they make the right decisions. So in my case, I would say this DAC theory is the best way to go. You have the direction, you have the alignment, and you really need to have the commitment. In our case, we are lucky. The politicians are with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. There's one question in the chat, but before we jump to that, I would first of all like to point towards the transition team playbook that we have recently published. I hope everybody has seen it because it's very much, or it's very similar to what Anna was speaking about in her climate transition unit. It's maybe Eugenie, you can share it in the chat. It's worth the read. And then I have one question for you, Anna. You said you were lucky to have the political support, but I assume that there is a connection between having an engaged like having citizens engaged, communicating openly, you know, making sure that people are aware, and the political pressure it creates, right? Is there a connection there? Could you speak to that briefly?
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. And but on the other side, I also think that the environmental or sustainable development has been an issue in Sweden for many, many years. So that's also something that we can benefit on. I wouldn't say that all citizens are engaged, but at least I would say that the politicians are aware. And this is, so of course they interact if the citizens were not interested at all. But I don't think that, and maybe Johan would like to comment on that as well in Umeå, but I think it's very difficult for me to see that we would have a situation where the politicians are not aiming at sustainable development. I don't think that will be an issue for us. But then the question is, what would they like to do? And that's why I think that we are talking about now, that we really need to do the analysis, the risk analysis, the financial risk analysis of different investments here to make sure.
How do you, sorry for interrupting, just want to make sure we stay within time. There's this question in the chat that says exactly that. How are you measuring risk and doing impact and assessments? which specific indicators have you created? And are there some internationally recognized ones? Maybe you can share even links in the chat, perhaps?
Yeah. And we are about to develop this. So we don't have it yet. We are in the development stage at the moment. This is very much about governance, of course. To have a good governance in the city. At the moment, we are developing this and try to find out how to communicate with the politicians before they're going to make these big decisions regarding huge investments.
Thank you. So for both Jordi and you, there are questions in the chat. If you could have a little bit of time and
Sure.
answer them, that would be fantastic. And I see that we need to reach out to you again, Anna, when we talk about governance innovation. There's a lot to learn there. I hope we will be allowed to do so.
Yeah, most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to hand over to Johan.
Thank you, Louise. Great being here. Yes, just for the context, city of Umeå is in the northern part of Sweden. It's the biggest city in the north, in a quite sparsely populated part of Europe, as you might know, about 130,000 inhabitants and 35,000 students. So I would say it's quite a young city and a progressive city. And I think we're the northernmost city within the NetZeroCity network, probably. I'm the director of innovation, but I'm also head of the mayor's office. And as some of you might know, we had the elections in Sweden just 11 days ago, both national, regional, and local level. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment, also in Gothenburg, I guess, for Anna. But I will talk a little bit about both the internal and the external mandate. So the first slide, please. So achieving the climate goals requires both management and control, of course, that can prioritize and follow up the work in an effective way. And since the climate transition needs a holistic approach and involves so many different departments within the city organization, but also our publicly owned companies, the mandates and responsibilities need to be very clear, of course. And as also Anna mentioned, the municipalities in Sweden have a lot of companies owned. We also have the harbor, the energy company, waste and sewage, etc. And it has definitely in the past years been an issue about the governance structure to support the ambition to reach climate neutrality within the city of Umeå. So the next slide, please. So the solution was that for the past 2 years, we have been changing our management processes and developing a better model for governance. So the 65 members of City Council and also many of our managers from different departments and CEOs from our companies have been very involved in this work. And in 2021, the City Council decided on new guidelines for governing that will strengthen our capacity for transition throughout the organization. So the City Council has clarified responsibilities in the plan for 23 to 25 for the implementation of our goal to be climate neutral, and also decided to form a specific program to align all our activities and join forces between departments and our publicly owned companies. So the program is framing all of the goals and makes it very concrete. It also includes new and existing plans, strategies, different projects that we are involved with, different assignments, collaboration agreements, and other agreements that we have to achieve the goal. And the program will ensure that the entire organization, including the companies, jointly steer towards achieving the climate targets that we have. And at the same time, the City Council also decided on specific programs for the digital transformation and the social sustainability and growth. And that also creates a common model for management and governance within the city administration. And all these programs have now been adopted by the City Council this year. And as Anna mentioned, even if, and it is the same in the city of Umeå, even if we would have a change in political majority, we will not change our model of governance and the environmental targets that we have set up. All the political parties is behind this new model in the city of Umeå. And also worth mentioning, of course, as Anna mentioned in Gothenburg, is that the fact that we also got mobilized internally by signing this climate city contract with the Swedish national authorities, of course. So next slide, key recommendations from the city of Umeå is, of course, identify your internal steering processes on a systematic and holistic level, and see, are the processes efficient to support the ambition on, for example, climate neutrality in this case. Identify your key departments and your publicly owned companies that need to be at the core of the steering process. And involvement is the key here also to achieve this. Start by bringing your internal departments together. Identify already existing policies and strategies. Make it clear that bringing them together, you will be able to reduce the amount of work by aligning different policies within the city administration. And this has proven to be very successful for us. So that was the internal perspective on the mandate setting. So moving forward to the next slide on the external mandate. In the city of Umeå, we have many initiatives, networks, and projects going on for many years, but there is a need to try to map the ecosystem for innovation to better understand the need for support and also to enable a broader project portfolio and funding schemes. And this is not to disturb the already ongoing work, of course. It is to improve the possibilities to accelerate the transition through the already existing initiatives. So the solution, next slide, please. Starting in 2021, we have the new initiative called Umeå Climate Roadmap. And the initiative have taken shape in collaboration with our local industry, the public sector, civil society, and also the academia. And the Umeå Climate Roadmap is a common effort for Umeå's climate transition. It also enables common priorities and new collaborations. Actors in Umeå can also channel their commitments into the roadmap to gather strength around the roadmap. Umeå also developing various support functions. We have a new, we call it an innovation teams, for example, through different actions that we need to take. And we also have some follow-up tools to see in what direction we are going. And they are jointly developed within the climate neutral initiative, of course. So the key recommendations, next slide, please, is to find ways to co-create with the local stakeholders. And we have heard a lot of good examples from the other cities here as well. And for the city of Umeå, we, if possible, we try to use already existing networks and partnerships and try to enhance them in different ways. That has been a success factor for us here in the city of Umeå. Thank you.
Johan, thank you so much for that presentation. Are there any questions? If so, please put them into the chat. I saw that my colleagues posted the transition team playbook into the chat. I want to use it briefly to say thank you to so many of my colleagues that have been working in the background on this webinar. I myself had COVID the last couple of days, so I just came back today in the morning. Nothing was ready, and I had a cry of help, and suddenly 15 people supported, and it's wonderful to see. So thank you very much to all the people that are working in the background on this. It's so much appreciated. Johan, what are your top recommendations to the other cities that are similar to yours?
Well, I think you have to, every city has different what you call it, preconditions, different culture, etc. I don't think there's a one size fits all. I mean, even in Sweden, we have quite a lot of similarities, but we all do it in a lot of different ways. So you need to find your own way, but you have to, I think, use the things that are positive, already existing, and try to enhance those in different ways. And as some of the presenters earlier also talked about, the leadership is of course very important, all the way from the political leadership throughout the organization. I think that's one of the most important keys.
But leadership is also something that you develop in the process, right? So the way that you lead your team, and you know, go through this process, you can create leaders and empower others to go off and do their part, or you can be very rigid in structures and kind of hinder that development. Do you have any recommendations on that, perhaps?
Well, I would say in Umeå's case, I think involvement and co-creation has been working very, very well for us. We don't have like one leader that leads everything, but we have a lot of leaders that are doing their part and trying to spread it throughout the organization. I mean, even in the political leadership, there's a lot of leaders driving this climate neutral, the green transition. And that helps, of course, that even if you're like the chairman of the board of education, you are talking about the green transition and what they can bring to the table.
And how do these leaders meet on a regular basis, informally or even structured, or how is that set up?
Within the city administration, we have regular meeting with the head of the different departments. And with this new governance model, we have these 4 big transition targets, green transition being one of them. And on every agenda, we have something connected to these 4 targets. So that's one way of getting it on the table every time and discussing it.
And then with the leaders outside of the municipality, are these just meetings that you arrange on a regular basis?
We are developing that further now. We have, as I mentioned, different kind of partnerships, and of course we have this ambition to be climate neutral in our partnerships with, for example, the universities or the local companies, etc. So we are using the different kind of networks that already exist. That's one part, but what we're now looking into is what will be the next step for the future. For example, we have a lot to learn from example, Gothenburg and Leuven, etc. Do we need to do more with the existing networks?
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your presentation and allowing me to ask you a few questions. That was really informative. Dear audience, if you have any other questions for Johan, please do put them into the chat. I'm sure he has a few minutes to answer them afterward. And we'll use the remaining few minutes to go to our last speaker for today, last but not least, Margin van Stam, and he is coming from the city of Den Haag.
Yes, thank you so much, Louise. Thanks for inviting me to speak here. For those who don't know The Hague, we are the 3rd largest city of the Netherlands, and we're not the capital, but we do house the national government, so we're a political city. We're also the only coastal city with about 550,000 inhabitants. And even though we've had a lot of speakers already, I think I'm going to shine a slightly different light on the internal mandate setting, because everything we've heard thus far sounds very structured and very formal, but you might know the Netherlands is known to be a very informal country as well. And a lot of decisions here are also made talking over a cup of coffee of tea. So that's been our approach the last 2 years. Can we see the first slide?
Next
Is it just
slide,
me?
please.
Oh, yes, thanks. As Louise mentioned, I came to the municipality in 2019, which was 1 year after our local elections in 2018. And then our city council decided that we had the ambition to be climate neutral by 2030. So our formal mandate was there. There was a political appointment for us. We had to deliver on that goal. So I'm part of the Sustainability Program Office. We're a team of 8, and we are not in one of those silos that you all know. So when we started our program management, we came into this world where there was no common language between the European experts and the climate experts. So we're talking about developing a European climate strategy, basically. That's what we aspire to do. And we had the luck that in 2020, the Recovery and Resilience Fund, the RRF, came into being. And then the program manager for sustainability met with our European subsidy experts. And they said, well, there are so many opportunities in Europe. Climate and sustainability is one of the main topics there. What are we going to do as a city on that level? So as I wrote, there was no multi-level governments. We were just, as a city, focusing only on citizens. So we are very much characterized by this bottom-up approach in which a lot of initiatives arise from the city and are lifted up over time. Also, something that was part of our problem setting was within those silos, individual colleagues are never stimulated to think outside the box. So they are always, for example, a project manager has to deliver on time and budget, but quality is rarely mentioned. Climate goals are not anything they will be rewarded for. So there was no ownership of the problem. But our approach from the get-go has been, we do not want to be responsible as a sustainability office for the entire climate issue. We want everyone to take ownership. We want our economy department to take ownership of a circular economy. We want our waste department to start recycling. We want our spatial planning department to plan in a more sustainable way. So we really focused on getting that ownership to all the departments where it had to be. So then we come to the next slide. And what we founded is called a green team. So we started in the summer of 2020, and we thought we need to bring all of these expertise together. So it was under the coordination of our sustainability office, but all the emission domains that we also know from the mission were present. So we had people from the energy domain, from the transport or mobility sector, that were all ambassadors within their own departments. So they became part of the problem ownership, and they really functioned as ambassadors within their own managements, within their whole departments. And that's been a setup that really worked. There's a lot of talk about transdisciplinary working, and I think that's really the key to creating a cohesive and impactful climate strategy. But what's interesting to mention, and that's also how it started, this was all an informal way of working. There was no structural organization. This was just something that we have started doing as a team that we all felt was important from our own perspectives, that we did get permission from the management of the departments to, spend a couple hours a week on this topic as a team, but this was not formalized. And that's really something that I believe in. Sometimes we hope that this big organizational structure that we draw out on maps or in graphs or flowcharts is going to change the world, but I actually believe more in the cultural aspect. So once you create that sense of ownership with everyone, they become motivated and they spread the word to their colleagues, you actually get this whole transition going. And I think that really resonates as well with the mission-based approach that we're all doing, because it's creating the same sort of buzz. And what's also interesting to mention is that this green team was the predecessor to the transition team that we are installing now. It's basically a one-to-one continuation of the team that we started 2 years ago. So for us, this mission really came at a very interesting time. So I have a few key recommendations on the next slide about this bottom-up approach. It's really important that all fields of expertise are present. And I think you just have to start working. In the climate transition map, we see that the take action comes after the climate city contract and the mission label, but I would encourage you start acting right now. I think within a transition, we can all come up with a vision and a strategy and good plans, but if we wait for those plans and the strategies to be finalized, we definitely will miss the 2030 mark. So it needs to be an iterative process in which we start working right now and develop the strategy along the way. As I mentioned before, that sense of ownership with every team member is very important. Make sure that you don't hold the whole climate or sustainability topic within your own team, because otherwise people would be, they start to, you know, relax in their chair and they're like, okay, because it's your problem, right? I don't need to take action because you're solving this problem for me. So I think that's something very important. And then working on the incremental change, as I mentioned. Also for us, the mandate was very fragile when we started this, because everyone looked at the team, the green team, and they were like, what are you producing? What outcomes are you generating? But then once we did the application to be one of the mission cities and we got selected, people were actually, oh, that's very interesting. Congratulations. Thank you for doing this. So I think the mandate will grow over time. Each time you produce an outcome and you start to prove that your method works. And then on the next slide, I will talk about a top-down approach, because this is really the bottom-up approach that we've taken on the sort of expert level, but it is also, of course, important to get a mandate on the higher level, the political level and the top management level. So then when we go back to the problem setting, what we did find again that we had 2 aldermen, one for sustainability and one for European strategies. Both were not informed about the portfolio of the other alderman. So again, we found this compartmentalized mindset there. The departments were not aligned internally. So there was friction about, okay, which alderman is going to be in charge of this mission. And also something that I found within the city is that top management, there's no incentive to invest in a mission. So everyone is cheering when you become one of the mission cities, but there is no actual investment in terms of money or capacity. So that's what we found. And then on the next slide, the action we took. Is always important whenever you advise someone to take a certain step, whether it is someone in a management position or the alderman, or even this is true for external partners, to make sure that your objectives align with theirs. And that's something that we have done really carefully, is advising them to support the mission and make very clear how it supports their policy, but even personal objectives. So on the next slide, I do have a few key recommendations. Yes. So whenever you want someone in a leadership position, and we've heard in a few previous presentations how important that leadership is, it's important to invest in a long-term and professional relationship. Because if they trust your advice, if they trust your educated opinion, they will most likely follow up on your advice. And it's important to also connect the long terms to the short term objectives. We're all focused on this 2030 year, which doesn't seem very long to me and to us maybe. But in the political field, we in the Netherlands work in 4-year cycles. I imagine it's similar in other countries. So 8 years is double 4 years, which for some people feels like a very long term. So someone in a political position needs the short-term objectives as well. They need to cut ribbons whenever they install a nice solar roof on a school, a local school or something. So you always have to connect the two to make sure it meets their agenda. Something else I found is that there's a lot of abstract European jargon, and that does not resonate with at least what I found here in The Hague amongst colleagues, amongst politicians, but definitely not among citizens. So I'm constantly translating this language to not only the language, but the whole setup of the mission, the method, to how can I sell that? How can I implement that? How do I translate it to our local skill? And something else that's very important is that you work on your visibility. So that's also has to do with that incremental change, making sure to celebrate your successes, but making sure that you really promote yourself, that you communicate the successes that you achieve, to make sure you stay visible and you keep the climate agenda on people's minds. All right, that's all I have so far. I'm interested to hear if you have any questions. Thank you.
That was a brilliant presentation. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I loved what you said about just getting started and starting with informal structures, and that cultural aspects are key. And then if you can prove that you're being successful, then it might lead to more formalized structures and funding as you go along. And I took note, of course, that the European jargon is difficult. We are aware, and we're also trying to kind of reduce jargon as much as possible. It's also hard working with so different cities, I have to say. So there will always be a little bit of translation into your local context that will stay, of course, but point taken. Yeah. Are there any questions? I can see it here. Did you have a political commitment to become climate neutral? In Den Haag, had the political commitment to become climate neutral been set by the city before joining the mission?
Yes, so that commitment has been set in 2018, not only by the acting politicians, but by the entire city council. So it was a very broad supported decision. Yeah.
And maybe could you expand on this cultural aspect a little bit? How do you change that structure? From my experience, also sometimes in a city, you have certain small bubbles that work differently, and you have young people coming in, or different from other sectors, or, you know, like there's, but how do you then expand this different way of working and cultural approach? Well, how did you do that, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us, we are constantly working on internal communication, and we've set up a whole series of different workshops that go more in depth. So we first did an internal stakeholder analysis in which we identified those bubbles of colleagues. Some are experts on the climate fields, some are maybe a little bit more hesitant, some are open to hearing the story, but they just don't know much. And we want to provide them with the right amount of communication. So the past years, we've been having monthly webinars for all of our colleagues. to focus on a specific theme. So we've had food, we've had energy, so basically all the topics you can imagine. Even a few weeks ago, we had the Hague's Climate Week, in which we had a full week of different sessions, again, ranging from very activist sessions that went very deep into the topic to maybe people who go on a cycling excursion into the city, which is very easy to join, in which people can just get familiar with the topic and just get a first taste or a first feel. So that internal communication.
And that was the Den Haag Climate Week was just internal, or also for
yes, it was
citizens?
just for our colleagues. Yes,
just internal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, because we really think it's important. It all starts with that sense of urgency, and some people feel that sense of urgency, know about it. Then you can work with those people on the next step, which is to take action. But we always continue to work on the still large group of colleagues who don't feel the sense of urgency. So we work with different groups through different methods.
And this whole week
Yeah.
Covered everything from food to energy to built environment to mobility, and gave individuals an opportunity to learn beyond their daily work in other
exactly.
fields that are relevant to the transition, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
It was actually very successful. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many people did you have joining from Den Haag?
I think we had 800 plus people signed up. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, throughout the week.
That's amazing. It reminds me of the summer school that happened in Spain, and I'm not sure everybody knows yet, but the Spanish cities, 23, applied for the mission. Not all of them could become mission cities, of course, but instead of waiting for other funds to be made available, they just said, okay, let's learn from each other. Let's set up a summer school. Let's learn from Madrid, from Valencia, from some cities that have been preparing a little bit longer, and come together to address this together. And I think it's beautiful because they also just got it started. Are there any other questions for Martin? If so, please put them into the chat. I think I saw a raised hand before, but I'm not sure that we can speak because we're a lot of people. But we can still take questions.
I haven't spotted anything, Louise. So
okay,
neither in the Q&A, in the chat, and no raised hand anymore. But if you are the raised hand, feel free to raise it again.
No, it's fine. We can slowly come to a close. This is a very long webinar, and I know it's intense to stay focused for such a long period. Before we jump off, I'd be super keen to hear from you how you found this webinar. And we are very open to constructive criticism as well, of course. As you are aware, NetZeroCities is trying to support 112 cities. That is tricky at times because we also have limited resources, but we're trying our best. It would be fantastic to see you in person, of course. But with regards to this webinar, was it useful for you at all? If it wasn't useful, why not? What could we have done better? Please just put it into the chat. We're very happy to hear from you. Also constructive criticism. I'll give you 3-4 minutes to do that, and then we'll wrap up maybe 3 minutes early so that you have time to get some water before your next meeting. And we will share the slides and the recording, of course, afterwards. So you can access the links in there.
Regarding recordings, there was a question at the very beginning, Louise, I don't know if you saw it, about essentially where we're going to be able to find recordings. And also the other question is when. Do you have any information on how much time we're taking to sort of process the recordings and post them on the portal?
To be honest, I don't, but I don't think that it should be too long. I think 3-4 days. I'm more than happy to make sure that it's to kind of push it along, and I don't see why it should take longer.
Yeah, we will follow up on this, and if you post it, just know that on the portal, there every single event has its own page, and it's likely that you'll find there the recording of the event once it was finished, once it ends.
But I'll also make a note that in communication that's sent out directly to you guys, that we kind of refer to that again and say, hey, the recording is now online and the link to the slides, and this is where you can find them. So we'll make sure to communicate it double if necessary, just so that everybody's aware. Okay, fantastic. If you do have any other feedback, feel free to share it with us. So far it was only positive, but that's good to hear. I'll give you back 6 minutes of your time. I thank again the speakers for being here today and for taking the time to prepare specifically for this webinar. I know that busy individuals often have presentations prepared and they're just kind of copy pasting them and kind of redoing what they've done in the past. I was mean. I gave some very standardized templates because I wanted to make sure that it's tailored to the cities and that it's full of recommendations. And I know that preparing for that is much more work. And thanks again to everybody that was helping in the background from the wider NetZeroCities consortium. Have a lovely remaining afternoon. And we're looking forward to seeing you hopefully by the next webinar. Bye-bye.